Okay, I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's April 15th, 2019. We're in the Aldermanic Chamber, and it's 7:28. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large, Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman at Large, Michael O'Brien is present. Alderman at Large, Ben Clemens.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large, Shoshana Kelly. Alderman at Large, David Tenza. Present. Alderman Jan Schmidt.
Here.
Also in attendance is Alderman Jetty, Alderman Klee, and Alderwoman Gathright, Alderman Gathright. And Chair, Richard A. Dowd.
Present. Okay, first order of business, public comment. Or is there anybody that'd like to comment on items on the agenda? Seeing none. Communications. Mike,
Yes, there is none.
unfinished business?
There is none.
New business?
There is none.
Okay, so that we can release some of the people that are here solely for the bonding, if there's no objection, I'm going to take the agenda out of order on R-19-127. So,
Okay, and
Alderman O'Brien?
thank you. I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, the motion is for final passage of R-19-1.
Isn't it tabled? Just come off the table?
I'm sorry, you're right. Take
So
it off
what-
the table first.
Oh, which do you want? Okay, I'm confused. This one. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to take R-19-127 off the table.
Motion is to take R-19-127 off the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Thank you. Now I would like to follow up with a motion to recommend final passage.
All right, the motion on the floor is final passage of R-19-127, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $2,800,000 for police department heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, Hvac, and window improvements. Discussion. Alderman Wilshire.
As we saw from the PowerPoint presentation, this money will be well spent on a very tired and worn building. And it's probably not a very healthy building either, so I will definitely support this.
Alderman Clemenson, Alderman O'Brien.
I just echo what Alderman Wilshire just said. This looks like a very good project. It's money that should have been spent probably a long time ago, and I will be supporting this.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. I would like to also echo my support. As a younger firefighter, I was transferred to the old Lake Street Station, and my first night there, I distinctly remember waking up in the middle of the night. It was a tough night with the runs, but had trouble falling asleep because the shades were actually blowing because the coming right through the windows. And when you have something like this, when the municipality owns buildings, I would like to say we're supposed to keep up our infrastructure. It was shameful living under those conditions. This police station is a place where we detain prisoners. It's a place where people live and work, and it'd be, I think it's about time to take care of the infrastructure. If we don't do it now, we're faced with many other buildings in the city that are in quite disrepair. It's about time we get ahead of the situation. Thank you.
Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you. We can easily see that it's not fiscally responsible to leave it this way. I don't think we have a choice. I really think that we need to move forward on this. Thank you.
Alderman Kelly.
Thank you. If I could put a finer point on fiscal responsibility, I think the efficiency of that building that was brought up at 14% is just abysmal, and I think that this will allow us to actually recoup costs in the building that we're losing in terms of energy efficiency, and I think it's a step towards the legislation we just passed in terms of energy goals in the city. So I support this.
Any other comment? I think that allowing the building to get in this kind of shape with a highly qualified, certified police force and dedicated police force, this is like a no-brainer. We need to do this for them. Give them the conditions they should be working in. Okay, any other comments? If not, all those in favor of R 19-127 syndicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now this evening, we're not taking R 18-102 off the table yet. So this evening, Alderman O'Brien, do you want to,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to take from the table R 19-123, which is the budget.
okay, the motion on the floor is to take R 19-123, which is the budget, from the table so we can discuss tonight's department. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, this evening, we're going to be doing the Police Department, Department 150. The revenues are on page 40, and the appropriations are on page 144. Whoever is going to come up and sit around the horseshoe and... Who's going to introduce the team?
I think I will.
Okay, Chief Lavoy.
Chief Lavoy with the Police Department, as always, Business Manager Karen Smith. We have Deputy Chief Michael Carrigan and Deputy Chief Jim Testaverde, and Chairman of the Police Commission, James Tolner.
Okay, who would like to start?
Just before we begin, this will be the chief's last budget presentation. I want to wish him luck in his future endeavors. But I also, at the same time, want to welcome the deputy chief, because I'm sure he's going to have a lot of fun at this meeting and future budget meetings.
Well prepped.
Said, Mr. Chairman, I'm fully willing to take any sympathy vote you folks have for us.
Okay, so is there do you want to give a general overview or go right into the?
If I could give a general overview, as stated in the letter that I sent to the Budget Committee, our proposed 2020 budget includes, basically, we level funded virtually everything. We decreased a few things, and what we've asked for increases are primarily for in-grade promotions and for settled contracts, and also a couple of different things for our CLIA accreditation training conference. This year, this upcoming December, will be our on-site assessment, and then the following March of 2020 will be the conference. I'm not sure where it is yet. But that's certainly, that's something very important. Our reaccreditation, they moved it to 4 years. So we had a little money. Normally, we only send 2 people to that, but certainly the chief and the deputy chiefs will be responding to that, as well as the accreditation manager. We've also had in there for computer storage equipment, and we also had in for money for primary elections, the holiday stroll, and the Pride Parade. And I've spoken many times about all the parades we have and anything we have with primaries or anything. There is no parade budget at our police department. There's no holiday stroll budget. Everything comes out of our overtime budget. So certainly, and that's classically been underfunded close to $500,000 for years, right? You know, and we've been dealing with that. Certainly, we've handled that through attrition and many other management techniques. But we just can't handle that any longer, so we actually put in money for that, and we based the holiday stroll money on what it cost us last year. And when we talk about primary visits, certainly we're talking presidential primary visits. And the reason we say that is we don't charge for a presidential visit. That's a mutual aid among law enforcement agencies, that being the Secret Service. All of the other folks that'll be coming, and they'll come in droves, being the first primary, they pay. So for any coverage that they need, they pay. But when a sitting president comes, you know, you can imagine the security concerns for that. I mean, we're talking if they go down Amherst Street to the community college like they have in the past, I mean, you're talking from the overpass, literally all the way to the community college. Every driveway, every access way, every parking lot has to have an officer securing it and in front of it. So certainly the cost of that, that costs us, $18,000-$20,000 just that. And again, we don't have that in our budget. That's all part of our overtime budget. So in January, when we submitted our budget to the mayor, all that was included. Upon the mayor's city IT department budget, the $47,000 for the IT computer storage equipment was part of the IT manager's budget. Also, the mayor's budget, when he submitted it too, they had holiday stroll and pride parade events included in that as well, which they had not had in the past. Therefore, the bottom line reduction that the mayor gave us was $113,410. So certainly, again, that's much better than we would have been approximately $235,000 over the 2.25% that the mayor was asking us to come in at. And again, our budget has actually increased a percentage that is payroll and benefits is about 95% of our budget now. So we literally, have no flexibility in our budget whatsoever. So anything we do, we have to manage through payroll and through overtime. And everything else, all the bills, right down to buying pencils, has to be with the remaining 5% of our budget. So again, that's a very payroll-heavy budget, but, we're a tremendously large manpower-based organization. So certainly, when we asked for that amount of money and the remaining $113,000+ that we've asked for, that is our opinion, that's a need. And even with the 95% of our budget being payroll, we literally fund our entire budget by attrition. And what I mean by that is over the years, due to the fact we've been so underfunded on overtime, that we literally have chosen not to be full staff. I mean, the one time we were full staff is literally my first month as chief, and I had to cut $500,000 out of the budget, or we were going to, run out of money. So certainly, I was everybody's friend real quick in that respect. So that didn't go well, but that's just a fact with us. So certainly, as chief of police, I find it ridiculous that we budget by attrition, and that we make our budget each and every year, which we have done. We haven't come to you and asked for more money. We've made our budget. And a lot of times at the end of the year, we do it by cutting services. We're a service organization. We don't provide a product, we provide a service. So oftentimes we've had to pull people off Main Street, pull bike units, bring the pop unit back to patrol. Because again, everything we do is based on, we need to have officers in the sectors that when you call the police, you get the police. That has to be a given. There can be no gray area with that. So certainly with minimum staffing, which we have to have, not just because it's contractually obligated, but safety-wise. I can't have 4 officers on the street for the entire city of Nashua. Certainly, we have minimum staffing requirements. So we have to staff those. And when you combine training, you combine, people injured, you combine sick time, vacation time, and things of that sort, you incur overtime. So again, everything other than filling a sector, quite frankly, is extra. And I certainly think it's something that the taxpayers pay for and should expect. And we, quite frankly, we really need to find a better way to fund our department than having to not hire the full staff that we're budgeted for. Because even the staff we're budgeted for, as we've said, is not even a real number. If in fact we hire the full people we're budgeted for, we're going to run into a deficit, which is why we're asking for the $113,000+ that we've asked for, because other things, thankfully, have been rectified in the mayor's budget and in the IT budget. So, again, we think we certainly manage as best we can with what we have, but certainly it all comes down to I don't have a lot of choices to make because so much of our budget is payroll dependent, and again, minimum staffing wise. Whenever I pull somebody from somewhere, it leaves a hole. So certainly, all the business folks, and rightly so, want officers, riding bikes on Main Street. They want officers walking on Main Street, and they absolutely should have that. A department of our size should be able to provide that, with no questions asked, and we do. But unfortunately, days we don't have extra bodies, if we do that, it would have to be on an overtime basis. And when we train and we do things like that, that causes holes. And unfortunately, the holes have to be filled. And we're always trying to find the balance of who we can hire and the amount of people we can hire and meeting our budget. In the past, it hasn't been realistic. I mean, we haven't put a full court press to hire up to full staff because of the managing by attrition, but we feel that that is going to change this year. We've ended up coming up with a new 2-year certified officer position. We've actually done it by eliminating and kind of absorbing, projecting what we have for personnel now. So we've added $20,000 to the starting salary of an officer, a 2-year certified officer, and we've done that without adding to our budget. We've done that within our budget. So again, managing better is what we try to do. But we believe that because of that, that we will, in fact, have a good shot to be full staff in the upcoming fiscal year. I've been asked that directly, probably 4 out of the 5 budgets I've presented, if in fact I think that's a possibility. And in all honesty, I've told you folks straight up, I don't believe we can do that. This year, I believe we can do that, and I'm very confident we will do that. We have 2 officers that are going to be sworn in next week, so certainly, we're on the right track. So these are just some of the reasons why we've asked. I mean, if you look at our itemized budget, you certainly have all that in front of you, but we've literally level funded or decreased items. We've decreased witness fee overtime. So, we're doing everything we can to manage better within what we have. But again, with so much of our payroll being contingent upon contracts that are already settled, I should say. Plus, we have supervisors that their contract is expiring, but they have a Me Too clause, so they're going to be getting at least a fixed amount as the patrol officers got. We really don't have a lot of leeway. So that again explains why we've asked for the increase above what the mayor asked us to come in at. And I think that's all the highlights I have. I missed anything exciting?
Just one other thing that people may or may not know is when you do mutual aid, like your outstanding service to help Manchester in that critical situation recently, the city of Nashua picks up that overtime tab. And, those things are critically important to the safety of the state of New Hampshire.
Yes.
And, just like if we had in a situation, I'm sure they would do the same. So.
Absolutely. If I could speak to that,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Certainly, obviously, it was certainly highlighted in the news, the tragic affairs that happened in Manchester a couple of weeks ago. And again, we provided them mutual aid. That alone cost us, and we were only there 4 or 5 hours, that cost us close to $9,000 in overtime. That's something that's a given in law enforcement. And regardless of Nashua and Manchester being, the big kids on the block, even counting Nashua and Manchester, law enforcement in New Hampshire is very small. And we have to band together. We train the same. We all go to the same police academy. And I think it's crucial for us to render, certainly we have agreements to render assistance to law enforcement agencies, even in Massachusetts. I mean, we went to the Boston bombing. We had our SWAT team and bomb unit there. I mean, the law enforcement community everywhere is a small, close-knit community, and everybody needs help. And Manchester has come, when we had the old Bearcat and it broke down many times and wouldn't even start, and we had people up training, Manchester ended up coming here and handling a SWAT incident that we had here in Nashua. So, we're not always the one doing it. Certainly being a large department with the tremendous amount of specialty units that we have, it does fall to us to certainly assist other agencies. But again, that's part of being a premier law enforcement agency, which I certainly think we are. I've been asked many times, why don't we charge and things of that sort. I guess I can look at it this way. As chief of the Nashua Police, I don't ever want a law enforcement officer in a smaller police department to fear asking for help because his chief is worried that they can't pay us back. And, I bring up Hollis all the time, and when I say that is, we back them up all the time. We stop a car on the line, they come over and they back us up. But certainly when we send officers there,
if they have an alarm, they may have one officer on the overnight shift. That's it, that one officer. And if they have an alarm at a building and they have to search the building, certainly we're going to give them all the help that they need. And that's not going to cost us overtime. But if they have a SWAT call out, a bomb call out, anything like that, I mean, that's part of law enforcement. And I certainly think that that's our job. I'm positive that's our job. So again, I don't ever want to have to, have that small town officer worried and trying to do something that he or she should ask for help for, but they're worried about, paying the bill. And I get it. It's our tax money, absolutely. But that's part of being part of law enforcement.
All right, any questions before we get into appropriations and expenditures? Alderman Tenza?
Chief, I'm just looking at the budget book, page 144. I don't know if you have that. And I think it ties into what you were talking about before.
One 144 is the appropriations page.
I'm just looking at the line item 51330, overtime coverage costs. And it looks like, in this may be what you were talking about before, but 2019 was budgeted for $253,000, and so far through fiscal year 2019, the department spent $845,000. Like, I think you're right. We're right to plan for the events that we know are coming up every year, like the holiday stroll and the Pride Festival. What accounts for the increase this year with such a huge? I mean, it's almost 3 times, or more than 3 times what you budgeted for last year. Or was last year's budget just not realistic?
Yeah, what's the best way to, yeah, if you could.
Yes,
Pretty
our
much.
budget is not, the overtime is never funded appropriately. We are offsetting our overtime budget by the payroll account. So the budget is always going to be low. It's going to be low by a good 600,000 and probably about 800,000 this year. So it looks deceiving when you look at a budget compared to the expenses.
And on that note, that's what, I didn't mean to just throw that out there like everybody knew that when I was talking about it. I apologize. When I say we're classically underfunded in our overtime, we spend almost always $600,000 more than where our overtime is budgeted. And that's just reality. And it's a lot of it is because we're not full staffed. If you're not full staff, certainly you still got to fill those sectors, but now you're filling them with overtime at time and a half instead of filling them with an officer on straight time. Plus, an office, a police department of our size, just everybody having to have 8 hours of firearms training and defensive tactics, that takes months to do everybody because I can't do 50 people at once because nobody's on the street. So anything we do, it's all scheduled and takes months, and then you throw in any incident. I mean, and again, what we've presented to you is, and if we can talk about the overtime expendable trust fund as well, if I can throw that in there, but anything that happens out of the ordinary, a whodunit homicide, a homicide without an immediate suspect, I mean, that's going to cost us a minimum $50,000-$60,000 in a week. I mean, so this is just if nothing happens. This is just what we know we're going to spend covering sectors because of training and things of that sort, which that's an everyday occurrence, especially with the size of the department we have. I mean, we do patrol tactics training after we do use of force training. There's another 2 months of 8 or 10 officers a day training, and with days off and things of that sort. You may have other specialty units training. So you literally have people that are coming off the street and you have to fill the street. So when, overtime you hear the word overtime and it's, oh, okay, that's extra. Well, I get it, but that's just reality. I mean, you have to cover the street, you have to train, and you have to do everything you can to be the quality of law enforcement that the citizens expect from us. So certainly that takes time, that takes training, and that takes money.
Follow up, Alderman Tenza?
Just a quick follow-up. So the overtime, because there's a overtime investigative line item as well, and so for homicides, that would go into that line item, correct?
Usually, yes, under investigative. And
So-
cover would be, oh, I'm sorry, cover would be you're covering because somebody's out sick, somebody's in training, things of that sort.
It-
And that's kind of a large amount of it.
And that wouldn't be details where private companies are paying?
No,
their
not at
costs?
all, no.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Kelly?
If I could follow up on the point that was just being chatted about. If you were fully staffed, how would you see that budget line come down? Do you have a general idea?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly on straight time, you're making much less than you are on overtime. And certainly the more officers we have, they can be in a regular rotation rather than being in just completely out with overtime, having to fill in their spot.
Chief, you might want to address that in recent past, you had a problem finding qualified candidates to fill the positions, and you changed your tactics on how you hire now. So you now have access to a different group of individuals that are more qualified to come in and fill positions.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. That's what I was talking about with the Certified Officer 2 rank we added. It's a pay slot, and that is already certified police officers. So we get them. They're already been police officers for a couple of years, so we hire them, from other departments, and they're already spent a couple of years they're already certified, so they don't have to go to the academy. So that saves us 4 months. And we talk about functional strength, because again, we're not just talking not having the bodies, but even the bodies we do have, if they're away for 4 months at the academy, if they're in 10 weeks of field training, if they're on family medical leave for 16 weeks because they had a baby, we're paying them, but we're not able to utilize them. So, at any one time, we could be down 5 or 6 officers strength-wise, but functionally, we could be down 16 officers, and that all affects the coverage overtime and things of that sort. We certainly believe by changing our testing now, we're testing monthly now, and we're also actively recruiting certified officers. That's not only going to help us, get around the, sending them for 4 months to the academy, but it's certainly going to help us get people that we already have a track record on. They're much easier to background because literally we can pull their personnel file in addition to all of our interviews. And again, certainly they have to meet the standards we require, but we do, at least we have something to go by. And by starting them at a higher pay, that kind of has been the deciding factor. We've already hired 3 just in the past 6 months from this, and that's helped us tremendously because before, we were paying them $3,000 more. That's not enough to entice somebody to come and then their first year not have any vacation or anything like that and start on, with no seniority. So that's why we made that decision. It was tactical. We're always trying to find better ways to recruit, and certainly that was an idea that we came up with.
Karen, did you have something to add, or?
The chief
On the overtime.
pretty much covered it, but basically the overtime account is in the negative right now, will be offset by the payroll account, but we will be 0 by the end of the year. We'll make sure that it balances. And the difference in that pay is, like the chief had said, 19,000. But the amount that the first-year officers would be coming in at the lesser amount, those officers who left at a higher rate of pay was already budgeted. So those new officers coming in, it's budgeted money. So we are keeping the amount that we budgeted for a purpose and repurposing it for the salaries that they were intended for.
Could I follow on? Sorry. Just a quick follow-up. I wanted to know how many open positions you currently have.
Is 7. We currently have 7. We're hiring 2 next week.
And just if I could add to your question earlier, the overtime budget dollars would be reduced if we were at full complement. We just can't tell you how much, but it's a direct correlation. If you have a full staff, it's going to cut into those overtime dollars in a good way, so that number would be lower.
That was Commissioner Tolna for the record.
Sorry.
Just for the people that can't see. Alderman Clee.
Thank you, and I guess in some respects this has been answered, and that was my question about if you had a full complement, would your overtime go down? But having said that, you've got a new hiring ranking, so you've already been able to hire 3, et cetera. And you also made a comment that this usually goes well over 600 grand over what you usually budget for. Do you still see it going over 600 grand now that you've got this new system and being able to hire? Do you think your hiring will be better and therefore maybe your overtime won't be quite as extraordinary?
I would say definitely one affects the other. I don't think 3 officers are going to make that amount of difference, but when we get up to the full complement of 7 being down, I certainly think that's going to cut into that tremendously because again, now you have somebody on straight time rather than time and a half, and if that person's got to be covered 4 or 5 times, that adds up very, very quickly.
Plus you also have more people to train. Deputy Kerrigan?
I just wanted to add one thing to the chief's comments. We've struggled to actively work very hard to come to full complement because we know we're budgeting through attrition. So if we're having a particular area where overtime is running high, although we would like to get to full staff, we don't work as hard as we could to do so because we're afraid we may not be able to fund it. And that's been a problem. That's been an ongoing problem as he's talking about budgeting through attrition. If we know we don't have the bodies leave, we struggle to recruit them. And the recruiting process takes a long time, like 6 months if it's new. So that makes it really difficult for us to say, hey, let's hire full staff, we can do it. If we get close 4 bodies away, this year's looking tight, let's hold off. Then we may lose the candidate, they may go somewhere else. So it's really a shell game that we try to balance and play with the ultimate goal being to come in level funded.
Follow up, Chief?
Yeah, and on that note, again, I've been completely transparent every time I've been in here. As much as we want to be full staff, I've had no problem going, there's no way we can do that. And that's why this year is so much different, because I think in our new testing we will. And managing by attrition, it's just not a great way to do things. And certainly when I talk about, we may have to cut services, I mean, we quite frankly do that virtually every spring. We just don't advertise it. We project we meet daily on overtime. At our morning meeting every day, we hear what overtime and what it was for in the past 24 hours. So certainly Karen, as the business manager, has her finger on the pulse constantly. So we always know pretty much exactly where we're at, what we need to average every week without going over, or we're going to be in trouble. And we average about $30,000 a week in overtime. I mean, that's a lot of money. But if we don't do that, we can't fill our sectors. So oftentimes when we're getting to the springtime and we're projecting, because the last thing we want to do is come to you and go, we're going to be out of money next month. It's our job to manage the money. So we cut back on lots of things quite regularly when it comes to the springtime. It's just nothing really super major that we feel the need to come tell the public that. But again, we're constantly reassessing, reassigning, changing the way we assign things, pulling the pop unit back for different things because we just have to. Again, it's the same number of people, and no matter how you slice that pie, I don't have any extra people.
Alderman O'Brien, then Alderman Clements.
Yeah, Chief, one thing you didn't mention, and I completely understand it coming from the fire end, if I make a recommendation, that's why we call it shift coverage and not so much overtime. Because you are required to have a certain amount of officers on the street for the safety of the public, safety of the officers that are working for you. So I don't want to put out there exactly what is your number, what you feel is an adequate shift. But you have determined that, correct? And if you're down in numbers such as vacation, illnesses, injuries, you have to maintain that number of strength for the safety of the public and the safety of the force. Am I correct? So you hire back with shift coverage or / overtime for that matter, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We have minimum staffing for patrol officers as well as supervisors, and we have minimum staffing for detectives as well. And that's every day, every shift, and it changes the time of day. It changes on the day of the week as well, because we use analytics and all our crime stats to kind of help us out with that. So we don't just randomly say we have to have X amount of people here just because it's always been that way. We're constantly adjusting it, but absolutely. I mean, again, nobody ever hired back, 100 years ago when they let me be a real cop. I mean, sometimes there were like 4 of us out there on third shift for the entire city, and nobody knew that, thank God. But, those days are ridiculous. I mean, safety-wise, certainly not just for the citizens, which is paramount, but for my officers as well. I mean, we absolutely have minimum staffing every shift, and it changes by day of the week.
Alderman Clemmons,
Yeah, I'm all set. Thank you.
other questions? Alderman Jettie.
So, Chief, I think it's very important that the city, have a good quality police force such as your force has been. We probably have the best police department in the state, and that's something that that we point to with pride. And I'm a great supporter of that. I think it's very important. It's one of the essential parts of this, the city providing a safe environment. But I need your help, and I know that you have a lot of pride in because we have such a good police department, a lot of pride in your ability to support other departments, and whether it's Manchester or Hollis or Merrimack or Hudson, whatever. But if you could help me explain to my constituents, the taxpayers, why they should be paying to provide services to a town whose taxpayers aren't willing to support their police department like we are trying to support ours. Is there a training advantage that you have? That these are opportunities to train your people, or how do we justify to the taxpayers the providing these support services to other towns, and I wonder if the other towns could purchase support when they need it without having to buy a Bearcat. They can't afford to buy a Bearcat, and they're not willing to buy a Bearcat, but they can use ours when they need to. If there was some exchange, some fee that they could pay, they would benefit because they don't have to have that all the time, but they could, when they need it, we could provide it to them, and they could help us pay for your budget by by some kind of a charge. Is that, I know you're against that whole concept, but I'd like you to give you an opportunity to explain why that doesn't make any sense.
Sure, absolutely. And believe me, I get this question all the time from community groups and things of that sort. But I guess I equate it to this. I mean, certainly in the fire service, I mean, that is such a routine thing because, again, you're all in this together. You work together. You train together. Your neighboring communities, certainly, that's something that happens regularly. In the police department, and I don't want to give the picture that every single day we're in Hollis, Amherst, Manchester. That's not true at all. And probably 90% of the times we're providing a type of mutual aid. It's not costing anything extra. We're there. In other words, if a Merrimack officer stops a car, in Pennachuck Square, and is asking for help, well, we're going to go help that officer, but that's not necessarily costing us anything other than my officer not being at that area for 10 or 20 minutes or something. And I mean, that's part of law enforcement. I mean, we don't have enough officers out there for ourselves. I mean, we get backed up by state police. We get backed up if we stop a car. I mean, I don't want to get into how few officers we may have out on Amherst Street at any one time. But, if you're between the Amherst Street overpass and Pennachuck Square, oftentimes your nearest backup is Amherst, Hollis, or Merrimack, and not Nashua in our own town. So, certainly mutual aid is just, it's not only traditional, it's crucial for departments to be able to function. Secondly, I think we oftentimes well, I don't think, I know, like our dive team in the past, it's assisted other people. They've been able to use that as a training day. A lot of the area departments have regional SWAT teams, which they didn't have in the past. We are one of the only people with a bomb unit. It's us and state police. Part of our training, we're required to assist other departments. That's part of us getting the equipment we got, getting the FBI training we got. A lot of these are contingent upon, the state-of-the-art training, the state-of-the-art equipment. Recently the governor was talking about ICAC, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. We have many detectives that assist with that. They've often wanted people full-time to that task force. We just don't have the manpower to do that. But we're constantly assisting other police departments with search warrants, with online searches, and the training our officers get in I think is it Alabama, Anniston, Alabama? We get a tremendous amount of free software and all kinds of product, and our officers are quite skilled at that. And it's incumbent upon us, being a large premier law enforcement agency, to provide the assistance to other police departments because, again, they provide it to us. And I certainly didn't mean to imply it cost us overtime every time we do it. It probably doesn't cost us overtime more than maybe 10 or 20% of the time, if that. What does cost us overtime is if they have a long, drawn-out situation where they call us, as a SWAT team, rather than, because we can get there much faster than a regional team getting put together and things of that sort. And that's just law enforcement. And I guess, and I certainly understand, how do you answer the taxpayers? Well, one is a lot of our grants we get, a lot of our equipment we get is incumbent upon us helping other people. But also, we certainly get, help as well. So just because we're a larger agency certainly doesn't mean that we don't benefit from mutual aid. Oftentimes, there's been times just regular calls. We're so busy and we're so tied up that we've literally, Hudson's had to come answer calls in Nashua. We've had to go answer calls in Hudson. That happens all the time. So I guess that's the price of doing business. And again, safety is my utmost thing, and I understand what the taxpayers, that's a valid question, and I guess my answer is that's the price of doing business. We certainly benefit as much as we give, we certainly receive, and I just think it's incumbent upon us, if we have that technology, that ability, that we certainly have to share that.
Chief, do you mind if I add a little bit to that? I'd just like to reinforce to Alderman Jettie. The chief touched upon the training that we receive and the equipment that we receive. The Secret Service brings our entire computer forensics unit down to Alabama and certifies them at multiple different levels of investigations. And then they'll turn around and give each of those officers with $20,000, $30,000 worth of equipment and $5,000 worth of software that they'll provide licensing for 3 or 4 years. So you're talking a net gain for us, not including the free trainings and certifications, but they're giving us $25,000, $30,000 worth of equipment. That's money that we didn't take out of our budget and we don't have to use to spend on tools that benefit the people of Nashua. We also have the Secret Service relationships, the relationships with the different federal agencies that we call them in a second. They're up here providing all of their technical expertise and all their equipment. So if we have a situation in Nashua that gets dangerous or gets much more involved than we're able to handle, we have relationships and we have people that we can call on a moment's notice. And that's priceless. That you can't make that money back up. So for us to give back to other communities, it's a win for us. We gain far more than we give in that one.
3 or 4 years ago, in this very chamber at a budget meeting, an alderman was concerned about mutual aid for the fire department and was saying, why do we do it? We should charge them. And right out that window, there was a fire. And we all went out there, and there were 6 other departments here, including Lowell. That was the end of that mutual aid discussion. Alderman Kelly.
Just a quick question in terms of process. Are we still going through appropriations? Because I have a general comment, but I can hold it if you'd like me to.
Well, I'll ask for general questions after we get done appropriations.
Okay, sure.
I noticed we didn't go through anything on revenue, so I assume everybody's happy with their revenue page. Any other? Yes, Commissioner Tholna.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure that the aldermen know and the public knows that every month when we have a police commissioners meeting, Alderman Plant, Alderman Dahl, and Karen does a fantastic job. We do discuss the overtime budget. Where are we in the process? why are the reasons why a certain level of the overtime may have gone up. Sometimes it's dealing with a homicide, or it's other issues, but we do discuss it every month, in addition to them discussing it just about every day.
Alderman Clemmons?
This may be question of opinion, or at least the answer anyway, or it might be academic, but is the reason that the overtime budget is so misrepresented because of the spending cap?
I'm leaving, what do I
Chief?
care?
It's your last one, Chief. It's your last one.
Give it a shot.
Hide your ears, I'm going out in style.
Go for it.
Yes, in my humble opinion. I don't even remember exactly when, but in the, not recent past, but within the past 10 years, we got cut almost $500,000. It was like 450,000-ish.
Heffern was chief.
Chief Heffern, so.
Oh, yeah.
So you can date yourself. All things run together. I go by chiefs, but we got cut like $450,000. When your margins are so small, that cripples your organization. That has crippled our organization for a decade. I mean, we legitimately have level funded or decreased 99% of our budget. The 5 budgets I presented, the 3 I was on as a deputy chief prior to that. So there's 8 of them. And I get it. I understand. You have mandates. You have to meet the mandates. But there comes a time, again, in my humble opinion, everything in your world can't go up in price and you expect not to pay for services and things of that sort. And I understand, and I think anybody would be hard-pressed to say that we don't cherish their money. And I challenge anybody to be as transparent as we are. And we meet daily on money. And I learned, the biggest thing I learned as chief is no matter what you do, that's not your money. That's taxpayers' money. And I've tried to, excuse me, to never forget that. And yeah, so my long-winded answer is absolutely. That, in my opinion, that lack of being able to improve, we've been treading water for a decade. And in my opinion, that's not really the best way to do business. That's our reality. We get paid to deal with it, and we do deal with it. And, my staff's off the charts professional about it. But my humble opinion while leaving is that's devastated the progress of our police department. And I don't want to talk out of school for other departments.
Alderman Clemmons?
What would and again, this is a hypothetical, but what would happen if you were to get $300,000 or so more in your overtime line? Like what?
Besides spending.
Like I guess
Yeah.
you'd spend it on overtime. I get that, but as far as the rest of the department goes, how would the National Police Department look different if something like that were to happen?
Sure. Well, again, any chief's a genius with unlimited funds. I'll throw that out there. I mean, none of us have new ideas. There's a million ideas out there. We just, we can't pay for the ones we want to do. But, I would think we would take novel approaches. When I say overtime, yeah, everything's overtime. That's not when you're just showing up to regular work. But I mean, there's a myriad of different things, and I've got so many creative people that I work with. I mean, a second pop unit we could assign to just that certain, hot button items. I mean, we'd improve. There's dozens and dozens of things we could do, and things I get asked all the time at meetings. Why? Hey, can we have this? Can we have that? It's like I'd love to, but I can't pay for it. And again, I never expected in my life to show up to a meeting where that would be asked, and so I certainly haven't prepared ahead of time for it. But yeah, we would find novel, progressive, nationwide, state-of-the-art things to do with any extra money. Because again, the money we have right now is just to get by. I mean, 2 years ago, out of our $30 million budget, I think we returned $10,000. I mean, if you can't, that's about as razor close as you can get with the amount of unknowns that we have. Again, I was asked one time, well, why why can't you budget for X amount of homicides? It's like, well, if I knew they were gonna happen, I'd prevent them from happening. I wouldn't spend the money to solve that, I wouldn't let them happen. So I mean, we can only project, and anything when our margins are as close as they are, anything is gonna throw that all to hell, such as a homicide. If we were the primary, if that Manchester incident was here, and our SWAT team and our officers had to shut massive roads down and be there for 12, 14, 18 hours instead of, the 4 or 5 we were there with just our 20-something SWAT officers, I mean, that would cost us at least $100,000, $150,000 in 2 days. And, we'd be ruined. We'd literally be ruined for the rest of the year. We would have to immediately start changing the way we do business, take people out of certain areas that quite frankly, I mean, when the downtown people want officers walking and want officers on bikes, they have every right to want that. That's something they should expect for what they pay for, and that's a service that as chief, I shouldn't have to bat an eyelid about providing that. And we normally do, but what we've been providing that is when we don't have extra officers, I still put them out there, but we hire them on overtime. And we have them walk and ride a bike at the same time. When we get toward the end of the budget, that has to stop because I have to make the budget. My people have to get paid, and I don't want to come back here and go, I need more because I couldn't work with the budget you gave me. I don't ever want to do that.
Just a couple quick points. I met with the fire department this afternoon. They have basically been level funded for the last 12 years.
Exactly.
And they're getting really tight trying to make do. The other thing is, I think I know the answer to this because you and I have talked, but the Stroll, which is now one of the biggest events in New England, over 40,000 people downtown, and because of the state of what's going on in the world, we have to put BPW trucks across every street, and we have police officers on every corner and plain clothes walking up and down. And I know that bill's like $18,000. And I believe you've taken that out of the budget. And do we know how that might be funded going forward?
Yes, actually, we had put that in our initial request in January, and it would appear that in the mayor's budget, he has actually included that in there.
Okay.
On page 82.
But that is a valid point. That's always just come out of our overtime budget, and again, it keeps expanding, as well it should, but you are absolutely right. It's become a premier destination, and, as chief of police, I can't go, well, we can get by with X amount of officers when you watch, Belgium, France, how many times do you need to watch a tractor-trailer or a truck drive through 50,000 people? Well, we have 30, 40, 50,000 people right here. And, it never happened before is not the excuse that you want me to say if something does happen. So, we decide X amount, with formulas we go by. There's all kinds of, mutual aid we talk about within the city. Certainly, and we figure here's what the manpower we need. And it's continued to increase because unfortunately what's happened in the world, we've had to increase the safety. But again, we're responsible for everybody. And, unfortunately that cost a great deal. But that actually, we made that point. We've eaten it several years in a row. And I spoke to the mayor about it and he has addressed it. So that is one portion that we won't be asking for.
Good. Alderwoman Kelly.
You actually started in on a point that I was going to talk about in terms of the events. I'm sitting here about a year in. I've had the pleasure to work with many of you on some of the events that we've put forth for the city, and I think one of the things that comes out in that is you don't always see how visible. It's not visible like we're showing up with a SWAT team or we're dealing with a homicide, but there are people at every single entrance, like you said, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. I know that there are people in the room who've sat at our Pride Committee meetings every single time to talk about how we're going to make sure that everybody gets to enjoy it. So as a citizen, you just go and you enjoy it, but you don't realize how much work and what a world-class group of people that we have in our department. So I just wanted to point that out, and I've been so appreciative of all your support.
Well, thank you very much.
Alderman Jenny.
So if I read this correctly, Chief, on page 147, it looks to me like the bottom line is, the mayor is posing approximately 200,000 less than what you've requested. So that's, you've requested 31,830,112. The mayor's proposing about 200,000 less than that. Is that?
Yes,
So more accurately, 180,000?
yes.
So is that close enough, or is it, where does that, what's the difference between, where's the 180,000? Is it here and there, or is there one thing that's difference between your request and the mayor's request?
Well, how was it broken down on the, you want to,
Sure.
depends on the breakdown you're talking about. We're still 113 different, but if Karen could,
180 is the mayor's reduction, and then we were able to take out 20,000 because funding has been put into other departments' budgets for the holiday stroll and for the, we're going to be billing Pride instead of taking it out of our budget. So we're trying to make up for that 180 reduction in other areas. So that would be 20,000. And then the computer that we had put in for a server for roughly
47.
47,000. We were initially asking for that, but it was already put in the IT budget for a program that they're doing. So we're looking at ways of getting that 180,000 for a more comfortable number. So we were able to get that down to 113,000. So right now, we are looking at 113 budget reduction instead of the 180.
and that's what I was, oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead, Chief.
And that's what I was addressing at the start. It had started, we were about $253,000 apart. But, you know, the mayor has added a couple of things. And, you know, again, you know, you could look at it both ways. You could say, well, it's only 113,000, but, you know, my argument to you is, yeah, that's all, it's only 113,000 more. You know, we certainly need that money. And again, you break down 113,000 to shifts, because everything we're talking about is an overtime shift. You know, and that's multiple shifts for officers covering. And again, that's, everything's important, because again, it's the same number of bodies. So, you know, we really, everything we've asked for is what we believe we absolutely need. And again, that's just need is the key word. There's virtually nothing we want in here, in the budget itself.
Alderman Jettie,
Could I
follow up?
just follow up? So in plain language, are you saying you need 113,000 more than what the mayor is proposing?
That's exactly what we're saying.
Other questions? Alderman O'Brien?
Chief, can we trip over to 54 Property Services? And it is my extreme hope, as what the committee, to the full board recommendation of with the HVAC system. And looking at line 54,243, I see in 2019 you budgeted $33,900 for HVAC maintenance. Now, if this passes the full board, which I hope it does, again, could that cost become lower, or?
Chief, can I answer this one? Thank you,
Deputy?
Alderman, for the question. I would anticipate that cost will come lower, but it probably won't in next fiscal year. We have to do the designs, do the sketches, we have to put it back out to bid, to have a company come in and do the work. So we're looking at a year plus to do this project. It is a big one. So I would anticipate the savings being in subsequent budgets, but not this one.
It's just
And-
like the middle school project. It's gonna
Right.
take a year for drawings.
And I think that's a fair answer, and I'm just looking across to the other emergency services. I know they have multiple buildings and they're at 23,000, you know what I mean, for all their buildings, but I was just kind of wondering. It is my hope, though, that this money does get well spent to keep a good system, brand-new system, keep it maintained, you know, particularly for the the range and everything, for the safety of the officers, so could be money well spent. Thank you.
We've got good experience with a 40-year-old system, so a brand-new system is going to be a pleasure to work with.
Does that bond also include replacing your lockers?
It does not.
Should,
They're all broken.
yes.
I'd be happy to discuss them.
Any other questions? Yes.
If I could just speak to Alderman Clemens' question on the 300,000, and I don't know if the 300,000 is a wish list, but I just want to mention on the overtime and looking at our overtime and looking at that we're going to be over, 100,000 is what we're looking for our expendable trust fund. So I want to just bring that to your attention. Right now, the current balance is around 40,000. We do have one transfer that we still need to request. I haven't requested yet for the last Manchester visit. That was around 8,000. So that account is getting low, and we're looking for that to be refurnished or reimbursed or another. Again, we did 200,000 and it lasted us 2 years, and we're down to the 30,000, but we're going to need that, especially if we're looking at right now a deficit of 113,000 for next year. Really, we would like to see both, 113 and then another reserve. The reserve is working fine. It doesn't have to be in the budget. It just needs to be available so that when there is a significant occurrence, that's the account that we go to.
Yes.
May I?
Okay, follow up?
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, I don't know what the committee is going to do. I don't know how we can get to these numbers, but certainly I personally want to have the discussion with the mayor to try to get some of these numbers back, because it's not just your department that has this cut. And I'm wondering if, you know, there could be opportunities, maybe, I don't know, to do some of these transfers through the escrow process as well, which, as you know, comes after the budget. So, you know, I guess to be continued, but there are multiple ways that hopefully we can address this deficit.
Commissioner Antola, did you have
Yeah, I
something?
just wanted to make sure that the group understood what Karen was saying, that fund that we had, because it gets us to where we need to be. It's not necessarily in the police budget, so when we need it, we can, for lack of a better term, tap into it, so to speak. It's like a safety net.
So much of the snow account.
Right, a good example. Thank you.
Good
That's
analogy.
what made us think of it. Alderman Wiltshire helped us with that.
Let me see the chief first.
If I could just add on that too, you know, we don't just look at it as a bank account either. I mean, the entire first year was in existence, we didn't touch it. So, because we didn't feel we needed it in addition to our overtime, you know, knock on wood, it was a mellow major crime time. But then, you know, the next year we had like 3 homicides, and I mean, and again, we can't budget for that, and that just comes out of our overtime. So right then and there, we're already behind the 8 ball, just making our budget for the next year.
Okay, Alderwoman Kelly?
Yeah, if I could just clarify something that I had asked earlier. I know you guys don't have the answer right now, but I would be interested to know if you were able to fully fund this, putting aside the ability to find the people, if you were able to be fully staffed, would that be a better investment than just giving you 300,000 towards your overage budget? I'm imagining it might, but I don't know what it costs to hire 7 police officers and at what level.
Yeah, and it depends what they're hired at. You know, certainly if they're not certified officers, if they're you know, they start at a significant amount less. But you know, again, anybody we're hiring at a set fee. I mean, the overtime's time and a half, obviously. You know, every time they're there. So certainly, it would make sense that the more people you have on straight time, you know, so you're not leaving those openings. And again, we're talking functionally, because they have to be all through training and everything like that. Yep. It's going to bring your overtime down because you have more people to fill those holes.
Right.
Chief,
Can I add one more
Deputy?
to maybe answer your question, Alderman Kelly. Some of the different projects that we invest in that we consider part of our community policing, those projects would be able to go on, and they're proving themselves to be effective. A good example is the Mirror Project. We use officers on straight time, and we pull them off the street to provide Mirror Project training to 8th graders at Elm Street Junior High, hoping to get into each of the middle school. That's a relationship that we build with all the middle school students that puts the officers in the role of the kids and the kids in the role of the officers, and puts them through scenarios so that they can better understand each other. The ultimate goal being to develop that relationship where they're comfortable coming to us, and we're comfortable talking to them and understanding what their issues are. So a project like that is important for us to continue and to keep funding, to develop the relationships where with that overall goal of reducing crime, and that there's more comfort and a better conversations between the police. Not just the mirror project, we have NCCRJ, we have the tactical first aid classes that we provide. We have computer forensics classes that we provide. We have elderly safety internet classes that we provide. So there's a whole bunch of things that are important, and it's things that the citizens of Nashville want. And the ability, if we had the additional officers, we could keep the officers on the street providing the services that we do, and not have to worry about always having a class plan and then pulling it back, having a class plan and pulling it back. We think it's important to reach those community members.
Chief, just for edification of some of the newer aldermen, would you address how long it takes to take somebody that passes the test as a new officer, how much it costs to train them, and how long it takes before they actually are on the street?
Sure. The cost of training, it depends. The last upgrade we did, if you count literally, basically their first year, because it almost takes an entire year before they're on their own. I think we worked it out to, it was close to $200,000, I believe. As far as the training and it's months of backgrounding in addition to the training. The polygraphing, we have to pay for psychological testing, and literally it takes several months to go through the process, just in all the backgrounding. And, we have detectives and we have professional standards, the recruiting officer and the training officer, literally going in person to interview all the people. And, as always, we get the best information, the truest information, not from parents, but from ex-boyfriends and girlfriends. They give you the real info. And when they tell you, we didn't get along, things didn't work out, but he or she would be a great cop, that's a pretty good recommendation. So that's a legit recommendation. But that's the stuff you need to do in person. So that's just to hire an officer. And then they go through several weeks of training at our police department. They get everything brand new, guns, leather gear, uniforms. They probably put 1,500 rounds through their new guns to qualify. They qualify with defensive tactics in addition to firearms. And all that is certainly our firearms training officers with their time, attached to this. So then they go off to the academy, if they're, certainly we're talking non-certified. So now they're gone to the academy for 4 entire months, and we're paying them, but they're not here. And then after the academy, then they, depending what time of year it is, we have our own in-house 2 to 3 week National Police Department procedure school. And the reason we have that is, certainly we all receive the same training. We're all certified, by one police academy. But again, the average police department in New Hampshire is quite small. That's not Nashua, that's not Manchester. So certainly we like to give that additional in-house training to them. And then they go with 2 separate field training officers for another 2.5 months. So literally, that's why functional strength is so important to us, because once they're out on their own, literally it's probably 10 months to a year, depending on their time span. So, when you look at that investment, and again, it is just that, it's an investment. And then certainly it probably takes a couple years before they're really, I don't want to say, they're certainly, you can count on them from the start. That's why they're certified. And anybody calling them, you don't want to be the part of their learning curve. So, it doesn't matter to you if they're a brand new officer or they've been here 10 years. You want them to be able to function at the highest level. And that's certainly what we expect. But we don't start getting a return, for lack of a better, word, for probably 2 or 3 years at least before an officer is literally completely proactive, completely can handle anything. And all this time they've been getting paid. And so it's quite an expensive endeavor, and it's certainly an investment. And then you times that by 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever is you're hiring, and it does add up. But again, that investment is for the next 25 years. That's how you have to look at it, and that's certainly how we look at it.
Alderman Clee, and then Alderman Kelly.
I'm kind of following up with that. If you were to hire the I think you call them R2s or something of that.
Certified too.
Certified, yeah, you wouldn't have all that time lag, and you wouldn't have, or would you?
Well, they would still go through the entire hiring process,
Right.
background and everything. They would still get that initial 2 or 3 weeks. But then rather than having to go to the 4-month police academy, they've already been to that. So then they would be able to, so we'd be saving 4 months with them. They would still go with their field training officers for 2.5 months because, again, We want to make sure they do things the way we want them done. And so basically what we're saving by a certified officer is 4 months of paying them to be gone, as well as now we're getting somebody that's an experienced police officer, and even with 2 or 3 years experience, now we're that much ahead of the curve where we're getting much more of a return on our investment.
Follow up?
So, but then you wouldn't have that 2 or 3 years, like you said, until they were really up to par, or would you still have that?
No, I mean, certainly the type of officer we'd be hiring would be top-notch and on the ball, no matter where they worked. So, we would expect them to be, a return on our investment probably within a year rather than 2 or 3 years. The ones we've recently hired, I mean, they've been, after field training, they've been outstanding. And we've hired 3 from other departments, and all 3 have been absolutely what we expected, if not better. And that's, and we equate it to, they're coming here, and it's kind of like, wow, this is awesome. If you want to be a police officer, certainly we like to think that this is a desirable place to be because it's got the combination of a, great citizenry, plenty of support from the public and the administration, but certainly enough going on that you can still be a police officer. So I'm a little prejudiced, but I think.
Alderman Kelly?
Actually, follow up just on what Alderman Clee was getting at. I hate to break it down to dollars and cents, but I'm interested in what a new officer makes and then what an R2 costs us in relation to that.
Sure. Ballpark, a new officer uncertified, I think we start at like 51-ish. And the certified 2, I believe, is 71, 72-ish salary-wise. And that may not sound like a big difference, but at most of the smaller departments, or even the larger departments, that's kind of the max that an officer is going to make at a lot of places. And they can come here and walk in at that and certainly be, eligible to go much higher. And we were able to do that by taking away some of the master patrolman spots that we were seeing through retirements and things of that sort. So we were able to make that $20,000 shift without asking for anything extra in our budget. So again, we're always trying to find ways to manage as best we can, but to us, that's kind of been the magic, elixir, because, before we were giving them $5,000 extra dollars, and, your first year, the way you accumulate vacation, you don't get any vacation your first year. So we had to change that as well, because if you've been a 2 or 3 year officer, that 2 weeks vacation you get a year, quite frankly, means more to you than an extra $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. So, we had to, again, recruit better, recruit smarter, find out of the box ways to do things, because we're just, it's not a great time nationwide to be a police officer. So we saw our tests from, we used to test 3 times a year and get 400 or 500 people at the test. We'd have to do a morning test and an afternoon test. Now when we do one test, when we were doing our quarterly or test every 4 months, we literally were getting, 150 people. So now we're doing it monthly, just so we don't have to, put the outlay of having 20 officers to monitor all the testing with the physical testing and all that stuff. Now we do 25, 30 at a time every month. And it's more economical for us. So we're constantly trying to manage better. But we found that seems to be the key, is the extra money, but being eligible to actually when you earn your vacation, actually be able to take it, has really helped us a lot.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes, I just want to make the announcement. I know we're discussing the police, but Chief, I'm very pleased to see that you changed the hiring practice to this. This is something, just more information on my fellow board members. The fire service has been doing this for years. We always had firefighter 1, firefighter 2 in career. National certifications, we've hired based on that, particularly members that come from another fire department. We don't rely heavy on psychological examinations. If we did, then nobody would become a fireman. But however, with deepest respect to what you do. But the thing is, we found you're getting somebody that is much more qualified. They're not going to run out during part of their training and indoctrination. They know what is expected of them, and we've had some great firemen come through that process. So I compliment you on your changes. I think that's a betterment to get service for the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none,
Mr. Chairman, just before we leave, I just want to again thank the chief and wish him the best. We had a meeting last week with the FBI and the DEA and the ICAT and the chairman of the Chiefs Association New Hampshire. All of them came up to the commissioner and complimented, said great things about the chief, complimented the Nashua Police Department, and thanked us for our efforts out in the surrounding communities and supporting them. And that was unaided. So that's, when they come over to you unaided and at the end of a meeting, come over and say, I know he's leaving. The deputy has big shoes to fill. But it's a long career and you've done a great job. And I want to thank you very much for it again.
Thank you.
chief, you've been an outstanding chief. At least you're still here till August, so.
Yeah, I didn't die or anything. I mean, but I'm still here. So.
Yeah. A couple of things I wanted to mention. Nashua was voted as the safest city in the United States. That's a extremely high compliment to you and the entire force. And I just personally want to congratulate you for that. Nashua is safe because of our police force and a great place to live. So we don't hesitate to try and make sure that you have the resources you need to do your job. The other thing is, I just want to compliment the officer that went into the Nashua River. I know the person ended up not surviving, but to me, you'd get a Heroes Award just for getting in that water in the first place, because I would never go in that water. And so I think that was phenomenal that they took an action so quickly, even though the person was already dead. But they certainly gave their all to try and save the person.
Well, thank you very much for recognizing them. And again, we most certainly will, but that stuff happens every single day, and I couldn't be more proud. So they do a great job.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Alderman O'Brien.
Yes, I would like to make the motion to place R 19-123, which is the budget, back onto the table.
Motion is to place the budget back on the table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I believe the next item is general discussion. No generals? Okay, public comment. We have no members of the public. Remarks by Alderman. Alderman O'Brien.
Alderman Jettie brought up a very good point about mutual aid and everything else like that, and dealing with it in the fire service. One could probably say on a daily, hourly, minute basis that, there's too many firemen sitting in the fire stations right now. And then we could have a fire, and then anybody could say a minute later, we don't have enough. So to compass that, it's been really a tried and true thing to have mutual aid. Looking at it, I know with the fire department, we do supply a lot to go to some of the other communities, but we receive in return too. We're a big city. We have some old structures and stuff, and when we do have a fire, it's all hands on deck. And it's nice to know. If the people want to question the validity of the cost factor, then I would take solace, or they should take solace in knowing, or some form of comfort, that their lives are being protected by another out-of-town company that is backfilling into that particular fire station. And if they should have the second or third emergency for that night, that that particular station will respond and perform their duty just as much as a Nashua company would do. So there's much great benefits to both the taxpayer and the citizen that enhances the safety of our city. And it's a program that should continue.
Alderman Clements.
Just to follow up on your comments there, you saw it in action this past fall down in Lawrence and North Andover when they had the gas explosions there. And, Nashua was involved with that too. Because, but you look at that and you look at a disaster like that happened. And to me, I was in awe looking at the footage on TV with all of the fire departments and everybody that was there, ready on call, and then to know that all of those other towns where we're being backfilled, like you said, with other towns and things like that, and what it showed was that New England's a pretty safe place to live. Because I'm not so sure that you would see such a response in other areas of the country on such a quick, no questions asked basis. And so it does make me proud to live here. And seriously, if that is the perfect example of how mutual aid is supposed to work and did work, was successful, and it's the reason why we need to keep it.
Alderman Tenza, then Alderman Kelly.
So, I mean, I've questioned the aid between the towns, mutual aid before too, and I don't think anyone disagrees that mutual aid shouldn't happen. But it almost seems like there could be some, at least part of some way for us to recoup the costs. And I know smaller towns, some mutual aid doesn't have any economic detriment to us. But, if there's almost like some, like a payment in lieu of taxes program or something that could be administered on some level so that people in Nashua, and I think it's different, and to Alderman O'Brien's point, I think it's different, I think the police department is a little different than the fire department. Police departments are generally larger than fire departments. I mean, and I understand the benefit of mutual aid, but I think the future is in some kind of cost-sharing program. I don't think that's, I think it's probably the county or the state that would have to get involved, and I'm not holding my breath for that, so.
Get Alderman O'Brien, then Alderman.
Yeah, and I just want to, Alderman Tenzer, I most certainly agree with you. Isn't it phenomenal that Nashua has a lot of workforce housing? Yet I look at other outlying communities and they don't. We have 2 veteran centers for people who are having a very difficult time transitioning from, military status to civilian life, and yet they're in Nashua, and I wonder, what's happening in other type of communities? Why are they here in Nashua? And I'm glad Nashua has big shoulders and able to encompass that. We're a big city, and we're capable of doing that, but it is duly noted. You know what I mean? We should be grateful for the some of the things that we are incapable and prepared to supply to our neighbors and stuff. And sometimes we're going to be on the short end of the stick. I can assure you, looking at some particular, more wealthier type of communities with 2-acre lots to build on, I'm not jealous. I'm proud to be a Nashua, and I think we're better served by it. Thank you.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Thank you. As long as I've sat on this board, mutual aid has come up. It's not new. It's something, in my opinion, is needed and warranted. Your house is burning down, and there's a house burning down, and there's a shooting somewhere, and everybody's tied up, and then all of a sudden you have an issue. You want somebody to show up. You don't care if they're from Hudson, Hollis, Milford, Amherst. You just want them to show up. And that's what the other towns and communities want too. I agree with the chief. This is law enforcement. This is what we do. I mean, if I need help and I call 911 and I want a police officer there, I want to know they're going to come. Even if they come from Hudson, I don't care. So, like I said, as long as I've been on this board, mutual aid has been discussed. But I feel very passionate about the fact that we should keep doing it, and always do it, and at no cost to the other towns and cities, because if we need them, they come here. Thank you.
Alderman Kelly?
I just didn't want the meeting to end without acknowledging the chief. The new members of the board didn't get to work with him a ton, but it was a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to working with the new chief.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you. I wanted to add to what Alderwoman Wilshire had said. The mutual aid, it was interesting to hear them say that we provide it, not just because we do it out of the goodness of our heart, but it's also part of lockstep with what we get as benefits. So I think when we talk to the taxpayers and our constituents, that's something we can say is that we're bigger and better because we give this mutual aid. It's kind of like a signature thing. We say, yes, we take all these benefits, and yes, we will provide. So I think it's a good thing, and I don't think we'd have too much difficulty explaining this to the taxpayers as well as that.
Alderwoman Schmidt.
Thank you very much. I think if we were to budget to take care of everything that happened in our city, anything that could possibly happen, I don't think we could do it. I don't think we could come up with enough money to make sure that we always have enough police for everything, always have enough firemen. And the other communities can't do it either. That's why we share, and that's why it works. Thank you.
Just one thing, I know when I ran for the Senate and I was visiting all these small towns west of here, their police force ranges somewhere between 3 and 5 people. And they may have one officer on at any one time. And if they have a homicide of a couple people, they can't handle it. And they get response from the state police and they get response from the closest large city. Manchester does a lot of it. We do a lot of it. But it's necessary for public safety. And also, if you notice on a number of occasions, if you go out and you see street activity, officers doing traffic control in the city here, especially when you're doing our paving program, a lot of them weren't Nashua police officers. You saw Hollis, Milford, when I started seeing all these cars on Tinker Road, I'm going, what's going on? And, so there's many different ways they help us. Also, the other thing on when the fire department comes in, we say we have a lot of firemen. No, we don't. Remember, they're on 24/7. They have to cover 3 shifts. And like in Ward 5, there's a single engine. And some of the places they have to go in that sector takes them 10 minutes to get there. If your house is burning, believe me, 10 minutes is an awfully long time. And for the other trucks to come over, now they leave those other stations empty. When we have a big event, one of the things you don't see is all those stations get backfilled by Hudson, Merrimack, all these other, Chelmsford. They all come and sit in our stations until the trucks come back. Because if there's another fire, your house is going to burn down. So, and it's a complex, very smooth running system based on all that goes on. And it's not always clear to people, but it is essential for the public safety of people, especially in Nashua. Anything else? Do I hear a motion?
To adjourn?
Yes.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Alderman O'Brien makes a motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 8:56.